with a whole lot of truth. Remedy Revolution is here for you. Ooh. And now here's your host, Erin Page.
Welcome to the Remedy Revolution podcast. My name is Erin, and today's guest is somebody I'm actually really excited to talk to. He has been kind of a pioneer in the world of xylitol. He has a company called Xlear, spelled Xlear. And I'm happy to announce my guest here today is Nate Jones. Thanks for coming on, Nate.
Well, thank you for having me. Thanks for the invitation.
Absolutely. So let's kind of start at the beginning. So how did you start this whole business of Xlear? Where did the idea come from to clean out the nose with this product called xylitol?
Well, the idea came from my dad. I don't take credit for it at all. At the time, in 1998, I was actually working out on oil rigs in the Gulf of Mexico. I was an underwater construction person. I commercial diver. And my dad started reading all these studies on PubMed where the kids who use xylitol chewing, they were using xylitol in dental research and how it prevents tooth decay. I mean, it's surprising, but they've known for 50 years that xylitol prevents tooth decay, and our dentists don't talk to us about it. But in those studies, one of the things that they noticed was that the children that were using the xylitol gum were also getting 42% fewer respiratory infections, ear infections, sinus infections, things like that. And then they did a study, and it was published in 1998 in the Journal of Antimicrobial Chemotherapy, where they showed that what's happening is the xylitol is binding up on these receptor sites in the nose, and it's making it so the bacteria can't adhere to the tissue. And they looked at strep pneumo, H flu, MCAT. After that, there were some studies done in Australia where they showed that it blocks staph from adhering. And so I got into it because, my dad told me about it, and I said, well, are you going to start a company? He goes, I'm 63. I'm not going to risk my retirement and start a business. And I said, well, I'm tired of diving. What about me? So me and a couple of friends put in some money, started the company in 2000, and here we are today.
Awesome. So what kinds of things are you guys producing now at Xlear?
Our number one selling product is the nasal spray. It's, we're kind of the pioneers in the whole concept of nasal hygiene as being anything more than a saline. And what xylitol does in the nose, I'll make a comparison for that. A lot of times people will go in and they'll just rinse their hands off in the faucet. That's what saline does in your nose. It rinses. If your hands are dirty, if you work in a hospital or a school, you use soap. And soap binds up on dirt, it binds up on bacteria, it binds up on all this stuff, blocks that so that it can't adhere, and it washes it away. It's a more effective clean. And that's what xylitol does in the nose. Xylitol, we know now that it blocks adhesion of a lot of pathogens, bacterial and viral, and it facilitates the movement in the mucus and the snot of all of that getting flushed out of your nose.
Right. So many of you listeners have probably heard of things like a neti pot doing sinus rinses, like what Nate was just talking about. So, the addition of xylitol can be very helpful. I want to be careful about the words I choose here, of course. I don't want to get anybody in trouble, but let's just say that it can be very, very beneficial to rinse out the nose for many different reasons, either prophylactically, for those of you who are listening with children with pandas, autism, kids that have multi-infections, this might be a good technique to perhaps get that pathogen load down a little bit. So now I'm sure that there was a lot of people who were coming to you during the pandemic. I know that it was something that myself and my family utilized. We utilized actually your product, Xlear, throughout the pandemic as prevention, and additionally when we did get acutely sick. So not to mention the fact that I know that the prevalence of mask wearing, for example, was actually increasing pathogenic load inside many people's mouths and noses. So things like strep and staph, I was getting a lot of patients who were coming to me with strep or staph infections on their face from it, blocking all of those bacteria onto, in the mouth from actually being expelled. So tell me a little bit about how you kind of got into this controversial space. And then I want to talk a little bit about what happened after that.
Well, when you say controversial space, what are you referring to?
I think
because I don't think that healthcare should ever be controversial.
Right.
And it's surprising. I've actually done a little bit of research on this, and it is absolutely surprising that healthcare is very political. And if you dig into it, you actually find out that it's the American Medical Association that is making it political.
Right.
I mean, I've read a bunch of their stuff because I hear all these physicians saying healthcare shouldn't be political, and I agree with them. And I'm trying to figure out, other than the money, why is it becoming so political? And it's actually a lot of the lobbying efforts of the AMA that has made that. But what specific controversial topic? Because I'm involved in a number of them.
Well, I think, coming from the natural health world, throughout all the pandemics, so many people were completely silent when it came to speaking about tactics and techniques to prevent and to assist people who were acutely sick. And we saw this all over the place, which to me, not controversial to me. I suppose more controversial in the space of mainstream media, mainstream medicine, people that chose to take a different route, who were speaking only about, we need to wait for a vaccine in order to actually treat these people who are acutely sick and dying. And that to me was absolutely criminal. So when I say controversial, my point is, it was controversial, but completely needlessly controversial. And I appreciate the stance that you have taken. So I would love to hear a little bit more about how you navigated all of that.
So how that all started, and this is something that I'll give you the story of it, because it's very interesting as to why it ended up this way. Because even prior to 2020, prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, whatever you want to call it, most of the time I call it a pandemic because I think that it was caused by our healthcare agencies, because every possible decision they made the wrong decision that actually made it longer and more severe. But even prior to COVID-19, doctors, nurses, physicians' assistants, all kinds of people, everybody knew that using saline irrigation, just salt water, was effective at helping to treat respiratory infections. Even on the CDC's webpage, it said that the way to treat a respiratory coronavirus infection was through saline irrigation. Okay? That was on the CDC's webpage prior to 2020. When COVID started, they actually did some studies at Vanderbilt University, and I understood they just won a football game. But they actually did a study there looking at people that had COVID, who tested positive, who had symptoms. All they did was saltwater irrigation. 100% of these people were better in under a week. And when we, Xlear, and NeilMed, and Navage, the other big companies in the industry, started to share that data, we all got warning letters from the FTC saying, don't share the data. And we're like, what? How is this? It's May. I mean, there's no vaccine for another 8 months, even if that was, what you were going to do. And NeilMed and Navage, they both backed down and said, okay, we won't talk about it. And we kept talking about it. And in July, the FTC actually sent us a warning letter telling us to stop sharing the data, warning us not to. Okay. And to add to that, by May of 2020, April, May, there was a study that came out of the University of Tennessee where they showed, earlier I had mentioned how we understood that xylitol blocked the ability of strep, pneumo, H flu, those bacteria to adhere to the tissue. The study came out of the University of Tennessee showing that xylitol also blocked SARS-CoV-2. If you block its ability to adhere to the tissue, your body washes it away. You don't get sick as much. Okay, this is a concept that we've known for 25 years now. Anyways, so we actually shared all that information with the CDC. We shared that information with the FDA. We asked the FDA. We had a pulmonologist that was treating COVID patients that was willing to do a study with COVID patients utilizing our nasal spray. They went to the FDA. The FDA was working with them to get it done. And then all of a sudden, they said, no, you can't do this. Your product's not a drug. You can't do a study. You can't do a pharmaceutical study, a drug action study on a cosmetic, especially a whatever type pathogen, class 1 pathogen, class 3 biohazard pathogen. And so we weren't able to do a study. They went and they did a study in India. And in that study in India, the people in the hospital who were using a xylitol nasal spray had over a 70% reduction in transmission. And they used it 3 times a day, once in the morning, once in the afternoon, once at night.
I guess that brings me to the question that I think so many of us have asked a million times, and that's, why do you suspect they were so adamant and so vindictive, really, against companies that were just trying to help their fellow human beings?
I would like to say that, I used to believe, you've seen the TV show The Office?
Of course.
Okay. I used to think that the majority of government employees were kind of like that. Okay. They'd bumble around, they'd do whatever, but at some point they would get the job done. And in the last 5 years, in the last 4 years, what I realized is you have a lot of government employees that are deliberately, and I don't understand why, but they are deliberately and knowingly causing harm. The people that sent the warning letter to NeilMed and to Xlear and Navage, they had to understand, I mean, this is not a hard concept to understand, that if you have a pathogen entering through your nose and you physically use something to rinse it out, you're not going to get sick you're not going to get as sick. Okay. If you're already sick, you're going to recover faster. That isn't a new concept. So these people that are supposedly educated, they should have at least had an understanding. So to sit there and go out and censor that kind of data tells me that there is something malevolent, I don't know, deeper, inside the government that they want to do. And part of why I think they focused on me is because when they told us to shut up, I kind of just said, no, I have a right to speak. We have information here that can help people. And so I chose to continue to speak out about it. And they didn't like that. The government, and this is stuff that, that they've sued us. And, in this ongoing litigation, there's a couple of really interesting things that we have learned when we've deposed them. One is that at no point did any of these people ever open the studies that we sent them. They said, you don't have the studies. You don't have the science backing up your claims. Well, how can you know that if you don't even open them? And you know what their answer was? Their answer was, it wasn't in the news, so it couldn't be true.
Wow.
That was their answer. That was their under oath answer in a deposition. So they sent a warning letter and they filed a lawsuit because it wasn't in the news, therefore it couldn't be true. I don't have to read the data. Now that takes next level,
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm almost rendered speechless because I feel like there are certainly excuses that could be made for ignorance. However, we're talking about next level kind of
I don't want to use the stupid word, but
no, but it's willful ignorance, and I think that to me is borders on criminal, at this point, because we're talking about
it gets better. It gets better.
Okay.
It gets better, and this gets so crazy. So I told you about the study that was done at Vanderbilt. No, not at Vanderbilt. Sorry, the one that was done at Nashville, where they showed that xylitol blocked adhesion to the virus. So that was done with vero kidney monkey tissue, which is the industry standard. That's the industry standard. It's what they use for pharmaceuticals, okay? Not for hygiene products, for pharmaceuticals. Well, the FTC came and said, well, that wasn't done on human airway tissue, so you can't use that study. Okay, so you're going to hold a nasal spray, a hygiene product, to a higher standard than you're holding injectable drugs. Okay, so we go and we do the study. We do it on human airway tissue. But we did it with RSV. We did it with H1N1, the flu. We did it with SARS-CoV-2, and we used a variety of sugar molecules to see how different sugar molecules affected viruses different. We actually learned a lot in that study, so I'm glad that we went and did it. But what we found is that we had sugars that would block RSV. We have sugars that block all of them block SARS-CoV-2. And we had some that block H1N1. And we have some that block some rhinoviruses, and we have rhinoviruses that we can't find anything that blocks it. So we learned a lot in that study. But I was actually on vacation, and I was down at the lake with my family. I had to go out in the middle of the lake to get a good cell signal. And I'm on the phone with lawyers and with the FTC. And we're trying to figure a way to settle this. And the FTC is just running around in circles. They're not making any sense. And to tell you how it goes, they say, you have to stop making a claim that xylitol blocks SARS-CoV-2. And I'm like, okay, you just told us to go do a study on human airway tissue. We did that. Now you're saying we still can't do it. Well, yeah, that's what we're saying. Okay, so you're moving the goalpost. But the killer part of it is we said, well, can we say it about RSV? They said, you can say whatever you want about RSV. Well, can we say it about H1N1? Yeah, it's not COVID. You can say it. So if you do a study and you have 3 products in there, it's the same study being done at the same time. You can say it about 2 of them. You just can't say it about COVID. Okay? That's next level stupidity. And it made no sense. And at that point, I realized that they were not looking at anything rational. And I figured at that point that the best thing, it wasn't going to be easy, but the best thing I could do at that point is probably let them sue me and fight it out in a court.
Mm-hmm.
And they did, and we are.
Have you been able to decipher any further? We know that the 3-letter agencies, particularly during COVID, were all in cahoots. Have you been able to decipher any directives from any other 3-letter agencies or politicians that may have swayed the FTC to come after you?
I don't know. And they have not given us that much information. We're actually, there's a motion in front of the court right now that they have to provide more information. One of the things that we found out, remember I mentioned that we were trying to get a study done with the permission from the FDA to do a study.
Right.
Well, the FDA was working with us to get that done. And I wasn't the point person on it, so I'm telling this all secondhand. But the doctors were working with, and they were going down the line. And then all of a sudden, the FDA started asking questions like, what time of day were the grapefruits harvested that you used the grapefruit seed extract from? What field were they harvested from? The ridiculous questions that you're never going to be able to find an answer to. And it became readily apparent that something had happened, that the FDA changed its mind and didn't want us to do a study. What we found in our discovery is that, like, within a week of that happening, the FTC had called the FDA and was talking to the FDA. They had not discussed what the topic of that phone call was, but we do know that the phone call happened. And the interesting thing is that when the FTC filed a lawsuit, they went to the FDA and said, hey, do you want to join us in this lawsuit against Xlear? And the FDA responded and said, we've looked at everything. We don't think you have a case. So no, we aren't going to join you in the lawsuit.
So where are we at with the case, and how much more do we have to go? I mean, I can imagine
years.
Yeah.
I mean, and I expect that we are going to win, and I do expect that the FTC will appeal it. And I do believe that this case will go to the Supreme Court.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why is when we decided to pursue this case, one of the things that we wanted to do was to knock out the Chevron deference.
Mm-hmm.
That you're familiar with that case?
Not entirely, but I'd love for you to expound.
All it is it was the policy that the government had from 1984 until last summer, where if an agency came out and said, hey, these are the rules, the court would defer to the agency and allow them to interpret the rules as they saw fit. And that's where you get a lot of this overreach and incompetence coming from, because a lot of people think that the agencies have expertise in their fields. They don't. Okay? If you really want the expertise, you go out to the industry because they're going to pay more. And the courts will actually get those experts to come in and help them interpret it. You have a lot of critics of the overturning of this doctrine, and they're saying, well, the experts are in the agencies. Well, the experts in the CDC and the experts in the FDA and the NIH gave us COVID. Okay, they gave us the AIDS crisis. I mean, you look at the NIAID, which is Fauci's been running it for 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. Can you name me one infectious disease that has declined in that 40 years? Because I can give you 20 that have increased, that have gone nuts. Okay? They are not the experts. They don't know what they're doing. They're just collecting a paycheck. Okay? That to me is a problem, but it's because they don't have any accountability. Okay? You can't sue a government employee for not doing their job or for doing a bad job.
Well, and I would imagine, just like in the free market, for example, when there's no competition, it becomes very easy to get lost in the echo chamber and to continuously only hear one side of the story. But just like as we know in scientific research, for example, many of the scientific papers are being funded by the pharmaceutical industries who are creating those products. And so, even if it's sound science and they report all the data correctly, oftentimes the studies are designed to have a successful outcome, because obviously they're being funded by the people who are going to get paid for creating that successful outcome. So it becomes this really vicious cycle, and I presume that the FTC is no different when it comes to all of those kinds of things. How do we get into the FTC? I would imagine, I guess what I'm curious about is, what is the actual lawsuit? What are they saying that you did to then incur their wrath, if you will?
Well, the FTC it's an interesting animal, okay? Because the FTC, the law that they say that I broke is that I made false and misleading statements. That's what the law is, okay? That I made false and misleading statements. But today, as of today, they haven't shown us a single statement that we made that was false or misleading. They've come back and said, well, it's unsubstantiated. And this is actually a point that I think people in America should really stand up and pay attention. Because what the FTC is trying to do is they're trying to shut down the entire natural product space. They want to get rid of homeopathics. They want to get rid of natural supplements. They want to get rid of all of that. And it's apparent. And the reason why when the FTC was chartered, I think it was in 1914, 1912, early 1900s, the rule was that Congress gave them was to make sure that companies involved in interstate commerce were not making false and misleading statements. Okay. And where that comes from, one of the things where that comes from was actually, everybody's familiar with the term snake oil.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's interesting because it's not that the FTC was found to stop the sale of snake oil. It was actually to stop the sale of fake snake oil. Because these Chinese Asian immigrants had come over and they brought this balm, like, you're familiar, have you ever heard of tiger balm?
Yep, absolutely.
So something like that, these Asians and Chinese had brought over, and they were using it here, and they would import it because it had some, I don't know what it was, but some snake, I don't know, skin, I don't know, something from a snake in it.
Sure.
And they would use it as a balm and a cream. Well, people here in the States are like, oh, well, let's just make some fake of some of this and claim that it's the same stuff. And so that's what they started doing, and it didn't work. So they were selling fake snake oil. It wasn't real snake oil. It was fake snake oil. But so that's where they came, and they came in and they said, okay, false and misleading statements. And so it stayed at false and misleading statements until the 70s. And then in the 70s, the commissioners of the FTC went and they asked for the court to give them leeway to fence in people who had already broken the law. So if I had broken the law and I was out there and convicted of making false and misleading statements, the FTC could come back and say, okay, we're going to hold you to a higher bar because you've already been convicted. So we want to make sure that you're not going to. So, and they came up with these Pfizer factors, and they're just qualifications. And then they used that. And then in 1998, after the DSHEA, the Dietary Supplement and Health Education Act, after that was put out by Congress, the FTC came back and said, okay, now you have to have studies to back up. In order to make it so it's not false and misleading, you have to have studies to back up every statement you said in a health product. We had all that. Okay, so during COVID, and so for 20 years, I should back up. For 20 years, we've been saying xylitol blocks strep, pneumo, H flu from adhering. We have a graph on our box. It's been on there for 25 years now. And the FTC hasn't had a problem with it. In 2020, when we had the study talking about how xylitol blocked SARS-CoV-2, and the FTC got all angry about it, we went and said, hey, this right here. And they said, no, in order to be not false and misleading, in order to be true, you have to have 2 RCT studies to back up every health claim. And I said, well, first of all, show me how to do an RCT study showing that xylitol blocks adhesion, because that's not the studies that you do with a random controlled trial.
Right.
And they said, well, we're not your scientific advisors. We're just telling you what you need to have. And I said, that's stupid. That is absolutely just dumb for you to sit here and say, you have to do this. We don't know how to do it. No one else knows how to do it, but you have to do it because we say you have to do it. But that's what they said. And so they sued us based on a law that they made after they sued us. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So
yeah, they sued us in 2021. And then they came out with new guidance in 2022 saying you have to have 2 RCT studies for every product you put on the market that has a health claim. And the reason why people should be paying attention to that is because every vitamin C tablet, every vitamin D, every vitamin E, all of these things, if you want to take a not cumin, what's that orange powder?
Curcumin, turmeric.
Turmeric, any of those, each one of those companies is going to have 2 RCT studies for each thing they say about their product. And that's going to make your products more expensive than drugs. Again, that is the FTC holding a supplement product, a natural product, to a much higher bar than what the FDA holds a pharmaceutical product.
So I'm trying to wrap my brain around the implications of this because, I think about things like Listerine or like dish soaps or things that make claims like, prevents 98% of bacteria, or even surface cleaners or things like that, prevents XYZ. Of course, they always have the little asterisk behind them. But are those companies then, would they be in danger of violation, or do we think that because these are behemoths in the industry that they probably already have those studies concluded?
Well, I don't think that those studies would be done because it's ridiculous. A, it's ridiculous to require them.
Right.
So I don't think that they would have been done. And B, nobody should be using a mouthwash that kills 99.9% of the bacteria in your mouth.
Right.
Even if you have a very high caries rate, the bacteria in your mouth that actually cause cavities is going to be like 15 to 20%, maybe. And the rest of them are things like the bacteria that help us metabolize milk, gluten, and a lot of these things. And if you sit here and you kill all those bacteria over and over, you would think that we would have a high level or an increasing level of gluten intolerance and lactose intolerance. And, I think we actually do have that.
Sure. Absolutely. So, personally, I mean, I'm not one, as the listeners know, I'm not one to recommend products. I will say Xlear is a product that I have utilized personally and within my family for the last several years, particularly during COVID. We used it, pretty much daily for a long time, because I just felt like it was helping keep us protected. We didn't adhere to any of the mask mandates or anything like that. So I wanted to make sure that we were, preventing as much as we could, from getting sick overall, just like we would in general. Tell me a little bit about one of the other things that we've utilized. My son has always really liked chewing the xylitol gum. And so we've purchased your products many times. So what is the difference in your mind between chewing the gum versus spraying the nasal spray? Does it have the same kinds of impacts? Is that something you guys have studied, or are those impacts a little bit different?
So they're a little bit different. And this is a problem that we have in the way that research is done in our country. And it is, again, mind-blowingly stupid, in my opinion, my humble opinion. But the way, so let me back up and I'll explain the difference.
Sure.
When you chew the gum, you're changing the microbiome in your mouth. Okay. They know that that's what xylitol does. They have the studies that were done at Turku. They were done in Belize, where they gave kids chewing gum. And within a couple of months, you change the bacteria load in your mouth away from the strep mutans. And the biggest thing about that is that I think it was 8 years after that study was over, the University of Washington Dental School went back down to Belize and did a follow-up on this. And the kids that had chewed the gum continued to have 70 to 80% fewer cavities, even after 8 years of not chewing the xylitol gum. Because if you change the microbiome, you don't get cavities. And this is something that we have been trying to get public health agencies in the U.S. to do, because what it would cost is $25 a year per child. And if they handed out gum for a couple of months a year in each school, they would practically end tooth decay, and they would reduce respiratory infections by 42%.
Right. Well, and
price
not
tag
to
of
mention,
$25 a kid, that's ridiculous that we're not doing.
right. Well, and just so the listeners are aware too, there was just a very recent court ruling stating that the use of water fluoridation is actually detrimental to the IQ of our children. So, what people thought that was benefiting children's teeth was actually not benefiting. So many states, I've just recently heard, are now starting to question whether or not they want to fluoridate their water, and many cities have started opting out. So I presume that, there might be people that are looking for ways to assist their children in preventing those cavities from occurring. So I think this is really useful information, but I'm sorry to interrupt. Keep going.
Well, no, that you actually make a good point, because I could talk about the oral aspects of xylitol for days, But even if fluoride was as good as they promise, even if it did everything that they say they told us it does, it's the most moronic thing to do to treat tooth decay, because all it does is it actually makes your enamel strong. Okay, that's all they claim that it does. It doesn't actually fight the bacterial infection. Okay, it doesn't do anything to get rid of the strep mutans bacteria in your mouth. And I use an analogy and I tell this story, but if you sit and you think of your tooth as a little castle sitting on top of a hill, you know, you want it to be strong, you want it to be, you know, defensive. But if you have a big army of bacteria and they're sitting there with their catapults and their trebuchets and they're shooting this acid up at your tooth, just using fluoride is like sending a mason out while this battle's ongoing and saying, fix my tooth, fix the cap, fix it, fix it. The best thing to do is get rid of the bacteria that are creating the acid. And nothing that our dental professionals do, nothing, for 100 years has addressed getting rid of the strep mutans bacteria in your mouth. That's what xylitol does.
Right.
And it's not like there aren't dozens of studies showing that.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, it's outside of the realm. And you have this group in the ADA inside the industry of dentistry that they've hung their hat on fluoride, and by golly, everybody's going to get more fluoride, and then they're going to get more, and then we're going to have varnishes, and we're going to put in our water, and then we're going to put in our toothpaste, and we're going to take pills with it. I mean, it's just crazy that they don't just get rid of the bacteria that are creating the acid.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and they've done studies now showing that if parents chew gum with xylitol, their kids don't get tooth decay. And that sounds like voodoo witch magic, but it really isn't, because if we chew xylitol gum, we get rid of that bacteria out of our mouth. We don't have it to give to our kids.
Right.
Because the bacteria that we have, it's a vertically transmitted disease.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. And we know that much of the microbiome is passed from mother to baby, for example. So, you know, that that's already been proven by people much smarter than myself, but certainly we know that microbiome is created by the parents, and then some, you know, supported by the parents too, because, you know, when you're in the same environment, you're sharing, you know, drinks or whatever it is, you know, it's mothers feeding the baby with breast milk, all of those things confer more of that microbiome into that particular child. So you can pass on many different things that way. So if we're taking care of our own microbiome, even if it's just through the oral cavity, I mean, the oral cavity is the first line of defense, right? Like that's where much of the microbiome starts.
Your nose, your nasal, and your oral cavity.
Yeah. True.
There was just a paper in the past 2 years. There have been a number of papers published on the nasal microbiome and how that affects your entire gut microbiome. But it is a combination of your oral and your nasal, your two gateway microbiomes.
Yeah.
That dictate what is going to happen through the rest of your gut.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can go back and even in 2000, the Surgeon General wrote a paper, and it was like 300 pages, but he wrote a paper and pointed out that you cannot have a healthy person if their mouth is not healthy. And even in 2000, they were pointing out that the incidence of tooth decay and bad oral health in the United States was actually and had been rising for about 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And they weren't doing anything about it. And in 2021, Vivek Murthy, our current Surgeon General, and Francis Collins, the head of the NIH, they actually came back and said, it's still going down. And what really appalled me, again, people in government sometimes aren't thinking, but they came out and said they needed billions more to fund more research to figure out how to stop tooth decay. It wasn't about utilizing what we've already spent hundreds of billions of dollars over the decades to learn. It's we have to spend more money researching more ways that we can ignore on how to prevent tooth decay.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Nate, I could probably talk for much longer about most of these topics, but I want to make sure that we don't overwhelm our listeners. So maybe we could do it again another time. But for now, I have 8 rapid fire questions. I ask these rapid fire questions of every single one of our guests. They're designed to give us a little bit more insight into who you are and what makes you tick. So, number 1, if you could choose only one natural remedy for the rest of your life, what would it be?
One for the rest of my life? I don't know, because I really, if this isn't a rapid fire answer, I would probably say salt.
Yeah.
Because then I can use it to make my food taste good too, in case I run out.
Absolutely. I love salt, and salt is great for the electrolytes and all of those kinds of things, balancing out our adrenals. And yeah, amazing. All right. Number 2, tell us something most people don't know about you.
I don't know. I mean, I already told you that I was a diver, that I was a commercial diver. But I don't know. I fly airplanes. I'm learning right now how to fly a helicopter.
Oh, awesome.
But I've been flying airplanes for 25 years. My very first flying lesson that I went up in an airplane and was learning how to fly was the morning of 9/11.
Wow.
Yeah, I came home and my roommate was sitting in his underwear on the sofa watching, and he goes, "Look at one of you dumb pilots. They flew into a building."
Oh, jeez. Yeah.
And then we watched the second one.
Oh, gosh.
But I have 2 kids. I mean, I come from a family of 14 children. I have 13 siblings.
Wow. Well, that's pretty unique. All right. If I were to compile a playlist of happy music, what song would you suggest be added?
Def Leppard.
Awesome. What's your favorite guilty pleasure?
My favorite guilty pleasure, it's not that I don't think that it's guilty, but my favorite guilty pleasure is Lake Powell in southern Utah. It's on the border of Utah and Arizona.
I've been there many times, houseboating almost every summer when I was a kid.
Oh yeah, no, I've been there a couple of times this year. I'm going again next weekend.
Awesome.
But I love it there. It's where, it's my happy place.
Sure. All right. What is the most influential book you've ever read?
Probably Fingerprints of the Gods by Graham Hancock.
Awesome. I've not heard of that one.
So what it is it's a book, and Graham Hancock, he wrote a book about the Ark of the Covenant and something, and then he wrote another book about the pyramids in Egypt. And I went to Egypt. I've been to Egypt many times, like 15, 16. I mean, my kids have been there 3 or 4 times. Because I find it fascinating. I find that history fascinating. But he actually wrote a book pointing out that just because archaeologists or science can't explain something doesn't mean that we need to make up stories to explain it and then teach those stories as facts to our children. Okay? And a good example of this is the pyramids. We are taught that the pyramids were built by King Khafre at 30,000, 2,500, 3,000 years BC. But they weren't. Okay? They weren't. And we know that they weren't. And the way that we are taught that is because a British or a French guy in the 1800s sent an archaeologist down there to Egypt to figure out what the pyramids were. And he was going to cut off his funding. After a couple of years, he was going to cut off the funding. And he said, okay, June 30th, we're cutting off your funding, and if you can't find anything. And so June 28th, he miraculously found written on a stone inside the upper chamber of the king's chamber and the Great Pyramid, something saying, my name is so-and-so, and I'm a slave, and I'm building this temple, this sarcophagus to King Khafre. And there's a lot of problems with that. The first one is no one else ever saw that. Okay. The second one is a slave back then probably wouldn't know how to read and write.
Right.
And so those are some of the problems. There was a stone in front of the Sphinx that said, this is being remodeled. It's being repaired by King Khafre. It didn't say it was being built. It said it was being rebuilt.
So interesting. It makes me think of so many things that, we may have been told stories about that perhaps are only half-truths at best. And
that is why Graham Hancock's Fingerprints of the Gods is because it made me start to understand that the vast majority of what we're told is probably not true.
Wow. All right. Number 6. What does the word revolution mean to you?
Oof. It means change.
And what does the word remedy mean to you?
Remedy would probably mean repair and fix and make better again.
And our last question, if you could impart one piece of wisdom onto our listeners, what would that be?
One word?
One piece of wisdom.
That hygiene matters. I mean, hygiene plays such a big part in good hygiene. And it's neglected, and it's been neglected throughout history. But it has done more to improve the health and the standard of living and the quality of life than any pharmaceutical product ever has or ever will. And I mean, you can go back and look, but even Ignaz Semmelweis, when he first suggested that doctors wash their hands between working on dead cadavers and pregnant women, they ridiculed him. And it was decades before they finally got on board with it. John Snow, okay? They mocked him and ridiculed him. He took the pump off the handle and their cholera epidemics ended.
Right.
And, you have all of these stories through history where pioneers and people, thought leaders, where they were trying to push a hygiene, a very simple, cost-effective solution, and the medical establishment pushed back. And they're continuing to do that. I mean, today, you can't make a hygiene claim or a reduction in tooth decay claim for a toothpaste unless it has fluoride in it. But yet, brushing your teeth with a toothpaste without fluoride is almost as effective as one that does have fluoride.
Sure.
Okay, because the only difference is the fluoride is supposed to make your teeth a little bit stronger. And if you use, this is an interesting tidbit about fluoride because I 100% am on board with getting the fluoride out, by the way.
Sure.
But the fluoride, if you took all of the fluoride that your dentist tells you to use, all of it, what kind of a reduction in tooth decay do you think you're supposed to get statistically?
I'm sure it's statistically they want it to be pretty high, but
No, that's what's crazy about this.
Yeah.
Ask your dentist. It's less than 25%.
Wow.
So if you use all the fluoride in your water and your toothpaste and your oral rinse, you use the varnish, take the pills, you do all of this. They only tell you that you're going to reduce tooth decay by 25%. I mean, just do a Google search and say what it is, and it'll come up and say between 20 and 30% reduction in tooth decay. With all those negative side effects, it just doesn't make sense.
Right.
For them to force that on it. And that wouldn't even pass muster for a product today, even to getting to the 50% reduction.
Right. I mean, the benefit risk analysis is just not present. You're talking about lowering IQ versus strengthening enamel. I don't know. I think I'd take the higher IQ, please.
Yeah, you might be able to figure out something like xylitol that actually treats the bacterial infection.
Right. So, absolutely. Well,
so I would say that just hygiene matters. Cleanliness is next to godliness. Whoever, one of the Puritan guys back in the 1400s said that. But that is true. And hygiene doesn't mean killing all of the bacteria on our hands. It doesn't mean killing all the bacteria. It means making sure that we have a eubiotic, eubiosis in our gateway microbiomes.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, Nate Jones, it has been such a pleasure. For those of you interested, I know you can find Xlear all over the shelves, as well as the xylitol gum. Remind me of the name of your gum. Spry.
And we have toothpaste, oral rinse, we have gum, we have mints. And when you're using it, you just want to be able to use a wide variety of it, which is why we have a wide variety of products.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for being my guest. Thank you all for listening. We'll see y'all next time. Take care.